I was sitting in my car, surrounded by sand and soldiers, when I received the news that I was divorced. We were married for almost 4 years. I spent almost a year and a half of this time in a hot, dry country on the other side of the world. She couldn't take it anymore, and I completely understood. I didn't even try to dissuade her. Being a military wife is the second toughest job in the world. Being a parent is much more difficult. My home was in Ponca City, Oklahoma. This is where I grew up and met and married Lisa Thompson. We were each other's first love. She was the first and only girl I dated in high school and in the college community. After college, I joined the Army and she went to college and became a nurse. We got married after her graduation and were assigned to Fort Belvoir, Virginia. We stayed there for a little over a year when I was ordered to go abroad. Lisa chose to return to Ponca City instead of staying in Belvoir. She began working at the hospital almost immediately after her arrival. When my year abroad came to an end, I returned to Belvoir and Lisa joined me. We had a great time together for 13 months before I was ordered overseas again. Lisa returned to Ponca City again. Neither of us were happy about this second separation, but we accepted that it was part of Army life. I had been in the country for about 6 months when I received a letter from Lisa saying that she could no longer bear to be apart. I married you to be with you day and night. We've been married for almost 4 years, and for more than a quarter of that time you've been on the other side of the world. I can't live like this. Please understand that I love you, but this loneliness is driving me crazy. I am including divorce papers in this letter. If you love me, if you care about my happiness, please sign them. I wrote her a long letter expressing my regret that she felt the way she did, but that I completely understood. I told her I wanted her to be happy, and if divorce was going to do that, then so be it. I told her I loved her and signed the papers. A few months after receiving the divorce notice, I returned to the States and was transferred to Washington, D.C. at the Pentagon, which was practically next door to Fort Belvoir. She was still in Ponca City and, I assumed, was working at the hospital. I wanted to call her, but I decided not to. Why tear open old wounds, I asked myself. I earned my associate's degree before joining the military, and through a lot of effort, correspondence courses, and on-base classroom instruction through the University of Maryland, I earned my degree. It was a Monday morning, and I had just arrived at my office at the Pentagon. I drank my first cup of coffee and checked my schedule for the day. The call came at 8:45. My father had a massive heart attack and died. By mid-afternoon, I was already on the plane home. There are no commercial airlines in Ponca City, so I flew into Oklahoma City and rented a car. My brother, Matthew Matt, and my sister Tina and their spouses were with my mother when I entered the house. Matt had been on the police force since he was 21. Tina, like my mother, was a teacher. I immediately walked over to my mom, who was sitting on the couch between Matt and Tina. She saw me, and we both started crying. Matt stood up so I could sit and hug my mom. When we both calmed down, she told me that Dad had a heart attack while he was cleaning the interior of his favorite car, a 1957 Chevrolet Bel Air convertible. He died in that car, and he wouldn't have wanted to die any other way. She almost smiled as she said it. The next couple of days were busy with preparations for the funeral. Dad was a veteran, so the military took a lot of the burden off Mom. We 3 children didn't make any decisions. She and Dad discussed what they each wanted, and she did just that. The only thing she asked me to do was to wear my dress uniform to the funeral. It still hung in the closet in what had once been my bedroom. I didn't need it abroad or in Washington. Yet, it just needed cleaning, and I needed to attach my medals and badges. The morning of the funeral arrived, and my mother looked at me, walked over and brushed an invisible speck of dust from my chest. Then she stopped, looked at me, and kissed me. Your father was proud of you. Later that day, Matt and I stood at the casket, greeting people as they passed by. We hadn't stood there long when Lisa, my ex-wife, appeared. I extended my hand to shake hers, but she ignored it and hugged me. I'm sorry, Michael. I was always Michael, never Mike, to everyone. I loved your father. Thanks, me too. She seemed to want to say something else, but couldn't. The end of the day arrived, and the family gathered at Mom's house, enjoying the abundance of food that friends had brought. Mom has shown incredible strength throughout all of this. The sun had just set when the phone rang. Mom and Dad still had a landline. Tina answered. Hello? Pause. Wait. Michael, there's a call for you. I took the phone from her, and she looked at me and raised her eyebrows. Hello, I said. Hello, Michael. Hello, Lisa. This caught the attention of everyone in the room. Can we talk? I don't think we have anything to talk about. You made your decision, and we're both probably better off for it. I'm not so sure anymore. Well, it's water under the bridge. I have an early flight in the morning, so I'll be heading to Oklahoma City soon. I'll spend the night there, so I gotta go. Where do you serve? She asked before I could hang up. Listen, Lisa, I don't have much time to spend with my family. Thanks for coming today. Goodbye. I hung up, turned around, and everyone was looking at me. We're divorced. It's over. I'm fine. She's fine. I told them, now I need to change and get ready. I have to leave soon. Soon after, I packed my bag and was ready to leave. Hugs, kisses, and handshakes were exchanged, and I finally walked out to my rental car. The next day, I was back in Washington. One of the good memories I got from Lisa was the love of classical music, especially Beethoven and Bach. Another of the three Bs, Brahms, was never a particular favorite of mine. 2 weeks after returning to Washington, the National Symphony Orchestra presented a program of some of Beethoven's works. Bagatelle was one of their pieces, as was his Symphony No. 7, Op. 92. The program was eclectic, also including works by Copland and Bernstein. Tickets were hard to come by, but the military district of Washington could usually get tickets to major events in the area. So I contacted recreational services and was able to get one. The evening of the concert arrived, and I headed to the Kennedy Center. I've been there before and loved the place. The first half of the program was entirely devoted to Beethoven. At intermission, I grabbed a drink and returned to my seat. Other spectators also returned to their seats. One couple walked down my row to their seats to my right. The woman walked ahead of the man. I stood up to make it easier for them to pass. As the woman walked past me, she stepped on my foot. High-heel stilettos can cause a lot of pain when they hit the top of the foot. I screamed quite loudly, which made her lose her balance and fall on me. This made me fall back into my seat. She lost her balance and then fell into my lap. I don't know how I managed not to drop or spill my drink. We just sat there looking at each other. It was nice for me to just smell her. The perfume she wore was taboo. My ex-wife wore them too, and they always had a strange effect on me. "How is your leg?" she finally asked. "Not bad." We sat there for a couple of seconds, looking at each other, until she spoke again. "You know, we're going to have to stop dating like this." "Why?" I asked. We heard someone clear their throat. We looked, and it was her companion. She gave me one last look and stood up. She smiled and moved down the road to her seat. At the end of the concert, we all left. I found myself behind her. I looked for her companion and did not see him. I tapped her on the shoulder. She turned around and recognized me. "Taboo?" I asked. "Yes. How do you know?" "This is my favorite smell." "And mine too." "Where is your friend?" "He's somewhere in the crowd behind." "Your husband?" "God, no." "Serious relationship?" "No, no." "In that case, will you give me your phone number?" "Rarely. I'm a pretty rare type of guy." She laughed. People around began to be interested in our conversation. Some laughed, others said, "Tusk, tusk." We walked through the foyer to the main door. She stopped. "I better wait for my friend." Would you like some company? For what? 30 seconds? He can't be far away. She laughed. In that case, I think it's time for me to leave. It was my pleasure that you stepped on me. She laughed again. And I enjoyed spending some time on your lap. I laughed and waved as I walked out through one of the many doors. I looked back, and she waved back. It had been almost a month since attending the Beethoven concert, and I was ready for the next one. It didn't have to be Beethoven, but almost any classical music concert would be good. I checked the Kennedy Center schedule and saw that there was a concert featuring the music of Maurice Ravel next week. I went to recreational services to inquire about a ticket. There was only one left. I took it. When she gave me the ticket, she said, "We could only get 2 of these tickets. The seats will be side by side, so you will sit next to the colonel's wife." I was a staff sergeant at the time. Military personnel and officers, even wives, rarely communicate in the same circles. In my work, I interacted with 2 colonels and several lieutenant colonels and majors. In the Pentagon, captains and lieutenants were even rarer than staff sergeants. I have never met the colonel's wife. However, this did not bother me because I was going to listen to music. The evening of the concert arrived, and I put on one of my 2 suits and headed there. I arrived at my seat early and was reading the program when I felt it. Taboo. I looked up, and there she was. I stood up and spoke. "I thought you said you weren't married." "I'm not married either." I was told that the colonel's wife would be sitting next to me. "My mother is married to a colonel." She sat down and explained that her mother had received a ticket but was unable to use it. "By the way, my name is Connie. Connie Self." She extended her hand. I took it. "Michael Carter." "So, Mike, do you like Ravel?" Mike. No one had ever called me Mike before, but I didn't correct her because when she said it, it sounded like "I want you to make love to me." "Yes, especially Gaspard de la Nuit." We talked before the program started. During intermission, we had a drink in the lobby and talked some more. The program ended with Bolero, which some consider the most boring piece of music, but others consider it the most sensual. I belong to the latter. After the start, I glanced at Connie from time to time, and a couple of times I caught her looking at me. It eventually ended, and I decided that if it affected her sensually, she hid it well. I walked her to her car. She opened the door, and I held it. She was about to sit down, but turned to me. "Aren't you going to ask for my number?" I looked at her. I asked her for her number the first time we met, but that was before I knew she was the daughter of a colonel. "Listen," I said, "I'm a staff sergeant. You're a colonel's daughter. I'm sure your father wouldn't approve of you hanging out with someone like me." "Who said anything about inclusion? Friendship does not depend on rank." "That's not what I meant." "What did you mean?" It's just, She smiled at my confusion, got into the car, and drove away. "Maybe you just completely screwed up. Staff Sergeant Michael Carter," I thought to myself. 3 days later, I answered the phone at the office. "Special Operations, Sergeant Carter. How may I help?" "You can help me by writing down 10 numbers," said the sexiest voice I've ever heard, and as she spoke, I could almost smell the taboo she was using. "I'm sorry." "You heard me. Now write them down." She began to name numbers, and I dutifully wrote them down. "Now repeat them," she said. I repeated. "Well done. Now you know what to do with them." "I think I'm starting to understand." "Another well done for you. Keep up the good work, and you might get a gold star." "Yes, ma'am." "Don't make me wait too long." She hung up. My first thought was how she got my number, but then I realized that her father, like the other 30,000 people working at the Pentagon, had access to the Pentagon phone book. That evening, I used these numbers, but there was no answer, so I left a voicemail. The next evening, she called me. "You didn't hesitate," she said. "You said not to keep you waiting." She laughed. We talked. Same thing the next night. and on to the next one, and on to the next one. However, one night was different. "Will you ever do it?" she asked. "Do what?" "Ask me out on a date." "I would like to, but—" "No buts, damn it. Either you want it or you don't. What's your answer?" "I want to." "Then do it." "Okay. Do you want to go out to dinner with me?" "Of course." "When?" "Tomorrow night." "Great. What time?" "At 7 o'clock." "7, so 7." And she gave me her address. She lived in a 2-room apartment. As she showed me around the apartment, she seemed especially proud of her shoe collection. There were very few clothes in the guest bedroom closet. The rest of the space was filled with shelves. These shelves were filled with shoes. Hundreds of pairs of shoes, and she proudly showed them to me. I was glad that she did not live with her parents. I was still unsure how they would react to her dating a private soldier. We dated for 2 months before we had sex. In fact, it happened the same night I met her parents for the first time. She invited me to have dinner with them. She noticed my hesitation. "Come on, Mike. They won't eat you. They're normal parents." "Of course they're nosy, because I've never invited anyone to dinner with them before." "Do they know I'm a private?" "Stop talking about it already. It's just, I'm sorry, it's—" "One more word about your rank, and I'll get really angry, so enough about that." Dinner went surprisingly well. I liked Colonel Jacob Self and his wife Marion, and they seemed to like me. When Connie and I left that night, her father walked us to the door. His parting words, and I believed them, were, "It was nice to meet you. We hope to see you again." That night in her apartment, we undressed and made love. Then sex. We took a shower together. We had sex again, and then we made love again, all to the sound of bolero. 14 months later, we got married. 14 months later, newly minted Brigadier General Jacob and Mrs. Marion Self became grandparents. The girl was named Ruth, and she was born in Virginia while I was still serving in the Pentagon. Then came granddaughter Carrie, born in Germany, and finally grandson Jacob, while we were stationed at Fort Lewis, Washington. We started calling them Big Jake and Little Jake. Life was good. Big Jake and Marion retired and moved to Florida, while Connie and I found ourselves back at the Pentagon. Connie, the kids, and I were in Florida visiting her parents. Connie and her mother took Ruth and Carrie shopping. Big Jake and Little Jake played in the backyard, and I watched and smiled. My phone rang. There has been an accident. An elderly couple in their new motorhome crossed the center strip and crashed into the car driven by Connie. Apparently, the old man had a heart attack while driving. He died, but his wife was in the back of the caravan and survived with many bumps and bruises after being thrown violently. The 3 of us rushed to the hospital and found that Connie and Marion had died on the spot. Ruth and Carrie were wounded but survived. They were still in the hospital when we buried Connie and Marion. We buried them nearby. The next 2 months were the most difficult of my life. Both of my daughters spent almost 3 weeks in the hospital. Big Jake and I practically lived there. I was heartbroken, but life had to go on. The girls were released and we went home. But that was not the case. We returned here for the first time since we went to Florida, and the 4 of us had to grieve all over again. Everywhere we looked, we saw Connie. Clean clothes were in an unfolded basket, and a dressing gown lay across the bed. Her clothes are hanging in her closet. Being in this house with her around everywhere was almost as bad as losing her a second time. The 4 of us cried for days, but it was even worse for Ruth and Carrie. They never had the opportunity to say goodbye to either their mother or grandmother because they were in the hospital and could not attend the funeral. It was difficult, but every morning I got up, got the kids ready for school, and went to work. It took a long time before I became productive again. The children missed their mother as much as I did. It didn't take me long to realize that being a single parent of 3 young children is incredibly difficult. 3 years after Connie died, I left the Army. The children and I returned to Oklahoma. We bought a nice house not far from my mother. My brother and sister also lived nearby. My kids seemed to enjoy spending time with their cousins. Connie was an only child. It took me a while to calm down, and after a few months I started to worry. I applied for and received a substitute teaching position at one of our 2 high schools. If all goes well, I will be hired full-time next school year. Life was going well, but I still missed Connie, as did the kids, of course. One Saturday evening, Ruth began complaining of pain in her side. It got worse, so I hurriedly took her to the hospital. My sister Tina came to pick up little Jake and Carrie. At the hospital, she was immediately sent for surgery and her appendix was removed. I was going to spend the night with her. She was sleeping, and I fell asleep sitting next to her on the chair. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, I woke up and was sitting in a chair next to her bed. I watched as the door slowly opened and light from the hallway began to fill the room. It took a long time, but I still recognized her. She was still a very attractive woman. "Hello, Lisa," I said. She hesitated. Then recognition overtook her. "Oh God, I didn't know you were here." "Well, I'm here. Come in." I stood up as she approached the bed. "How is she?" she asked. "You should know better than me." "You're right. Her chart says she's doing well." "Fine. I saw her name on the admissions list. There aren't many Carters in town, so I thought she might be either Matt or Tina." "No, she's mine." "Where is her mother?" "She died more than 3 years ago." "Oh, Michael, I'm so sorry." "Yes, me too." "Do you live here now?" "Yes, for several months now." We just stood and looked at each other. Finally, I spoke. "Well, I guess I should try to get some sleep." "Certainly." And she left. I woke up around 5. I had a blanket on. I spent most of the next 3 days with Ruth. Lisa came in several times. She and Ruth talked about boys and how they would react to her scar when she wore a swimsuit. "It's a very small scar," Lisa said. "And besides, when they see how beautiful you are, they won't even notice it." Ruth smiled brightly. The first Saturday after Ruth was released from the hospital, they called me. I looked at the number but didn't recognize it, so I didn't answer. The caller left a message. "Hi, this is Lisa. I hope Ruth is okay. Time in the hospital always seems worse for kids." There was a pause. "Can I talk to you, please? Over the years, I've had so many things I wish I could tell you, but never got the chance. Please, Michael?" I listened to this message at least 5 times before calling her. "Hello," she replied. "Hi, it's Michael." "Hello. Did you want to talk?" "Not over the phone. In person." "Okay. Mom is taking the kids to the lake tomorrow. Why don't you come over to my house around 10:30 a.m.? Or do you have to work?" "No, tomorrow will do. Where do you live?" I gave her the address. "Are you still drinking coffee?" "Yes, but now decaffeinated." "It's the same with me." She arrived exactly at 10:30, but she was always punctual. The coffee was already on the table when I opened the door for her. It seemed to me that she wanted to hug me, but changed her mind. I showed her where to sit. She sat down, took a sip of coffee, and began. "It was 9 months after your first tour overseas. I was having an affair. I was having a hard time without you, and I was waiting for you to come back. Sammy Young saw me at the mall and started talking to me. Do you remember him?" I shook my head. "He was 2 years ahead of us at school." That conversation led to another, and so on, and we ended up meeting for drinks and dinners. Almost 2 months later, I slept with him. Once. She took a sip of coffee. "When you returned, I was terrified that you would find out. But you were so happy to see me that the thought that I might be unfaithful did not even cross your mind. You probably remember that we had a wonderful year." I nodded in agreement. "Then you had to go abroad again, and I came back here. You had only been away a couple of weeks when he showed up again. I don't know how he knew I was back in Ponca. The thought of going through another year without you was unbearable. Less than a month after you left, I slept with him again, and she continued to meet with him for another 2 months. Then I found out that I was pregnant. That's when I asked you for a divorce. I told him, and he disappeared in an unknown direction. I've seen him around town since then, but we never talk. After I filed for divorce, I lost my child. I almost called off the divorce, but the guilt was so great that I didn't do it. I tried to tell you what I did when you came home for your father's funeral, but you wouldn't let me. Cheating on you was the worst thing I've ever done, and I regret it every day. I was selfish and greedy, and I can offer no excuses. I loved you when we were young. I loved you when we got married, and I loved you when we got divorced. All these years I tried to avoid your family because I was ashamed. We met occasionally by chance, but that was all. 2 years after our divorce, I met a man in the hospital. His mother was in surgery. We liked each other and got married a year later. 3 years after that, we divorced. Since then, I have focused on my work. Then I saw Ruth's name at the hospital. Like I said, I've been avoiding your family, but I thought if she needed anything, I could get it. I opened the door and you were there. I am rarely surprised and never shocked, but seeing you shocked me. I didn't know how to behave or what to say. When I left her room, I walked down the hall and burst into tears. I cried for 2 hours. I cried with happiness that you are alive and well. Then I cried for the stupid thing I did and for the love I lost. I took a sip of my coffee, which was already cold, and so was hers, I assumed. I sat looking at her and tried to think of what to say. I obviously didn't know she cheated on me and didn't know she got pregnant by someone else while married to me. Finally, I spoke. I don't know what to say. I always assumed that you wanted a divorce because you couldn't bear to be apart from us. But you say loneliness wasn't the problem at all. Lust was the problem. I understood loneliness. I loved you enough to let you go because I couldn't bear the thought of you being alone. That's why I agreed to the divorce. But betrayal is difficult for me to comprehend, even after so many years. The idea that you slept with another man while you were married to me is something I find difficult to come to terms with. I loved you enough to let you go, and while I was crying over losing you, you had a child with another man. I stood up, walked over and picked up her cup, taking her to the kitchen. I think you should leave, I said as I walked. Michael, please. Goodbye. She slowly stood up and walked to the door, opened it and turned to me. Michael, Goodbye. Why the hell did she have to tell me this? Does it matter after all these years? And why does this affect me so much? At first I was angry, then I just got angry. I fumed for 2 weeks because of what she told me. Then my common sense took over. Why should it matter now? We have been divorced for many years, and I no longer have feelings for her. The end of the school year was approaching, and it was a busy time for me, so Lisa took a back seat. Big Jake asked if the kids could spend part of the summer with him. I told him yes, of course. 3 days after finishing school, he arrived. We met him at the airport, and the children flew off with him. Their visit was to last 2 weeks. That's all Big Jake thought he could handle. I haven't had much of a personal life since Connie died, and 3 years is a long time. There were a few women along the way, but I still missed Connie. My brother and sister tried to settle me with women, but nothing worked. I mean, there was no spark, no connection. Oh, I slept with a couple of them, but it was just physical relief. My brother had by then become deputy chief of police. One day he came to my house. I had just finished mowing the lawn and was sitting on the porch with a glass of iced tea. He went inside, poured himself a glass, then came out and sat with me. We chatted for a few minutes before the real reason for his visit became clear. I shouldn't tell you about this. But since this is a matter of public domain, I think it's okay. Lisa has been arrested 3 times in the last few weeks for public intoxication. Every time my officers tried to bring her in, she would spank them and tell them to keep their hands off themselves because she belonged to Michael Carter. The first time she said it, the officer thought it was funny and told me. Then she said it 2 more times. Her father bailed her, and the DA decided not to pursue the case. When it happened for the last time last week, she decided to check into an alcohol rehab program in Tulsa. She's there now. I shook my head. Why are you telling me this? Her father thinks it had something to do with you. He didn't know you were back in town until the first time Lisa got drunk and started talking about seeing you and your daughter. When she sobered up, he asked about it, but she didn't discuss it. The last time he remembers that she drank at all was during your divorce. He told me that she usually doesn't drink much. I sighed. My question is the same. Why are you telling me this? Honestly, I don't know. It just seems like she's screaming for help, and you're the person she seems to be reaching out to or for. I took a deep breath and told him about our last conversation. Oh my God, he said. Do her parents know? I have no idea, but if she didn't tell them, I'm certainly not going to. We talked until his radio started calling him, and he had to leave. Over the next 3 days, I mostly thought about Lisa and what she had done to our marriage. Loneliness versus betrayal, love versus passion. The more I thought, the angrier I became. I don't owe her anything, so why do I think about her so much? I didn't have an answer, but the next day I called Lisa's father and asked if I could meet him and his wife. When I arrived, we shook hands and Lisa's mother offered me iced tea. In the Oklahoma summer heat, no one can say no to iced tea. I hadn't been to this house for many years, but looking around, nothing seemed to have changed. How can we help you, Michael? He began. I don't know myself, I answered. I heard that Lisa had been arrested and was in a rehab program, and I wondered if there was anything I could do to help. To be honest, we don't know ourselves. Everything was going fine until she was arrested the first time. Then we found out that you were back, said her father. We don't know what to do, Michael. She seems so sick, and she doesn't want to talk about it. We're getting old, Michael, and we'd like to know what we can do to help her. But we just don't know, her mother said, holding her husband's hand tightly. Would it help if I saw her? I asked. We've talked about it, and we're not sure if it will help or hurt, but it's probably worth a try, her father said. The next day I went to Tulsa. I checked in at the front desk and headed to her room. She sat in a chair, looking at the gardens. She turned to see who was coming in when she heard the door open. Her eyes widened when she saw me. Hi, Michael. I didn't think I'd ever see you again. Why is this? I thought you hated me after our last conversation and how you kicked me out of the house. I don't hate you, Lisa. I never hated you, but I hate what you did. She came up to me and looked me straight in the eyes. Me too, Michael. I hate it with every fiber of my being, but I can't change it. So I lived with guilt and self-hatred all these years. There were only a few days when I didn't think about it. Those days were a blessing. She turned and walked towards her bed, sat down on the edge and fell silent with a thoughtful look in her eyes. Then she spoke again. Why are you here? I'm not sure. I talked to your parents and... She interrupted me and jumped up. Oh God, Michael, you didn't tell them, did you? It would have killed them. No, I didn't tell them, I said, sitting on the windowsill and looking at her. It's up to you if you ever want to. I would never tell them. Never. It would ruin them. She sat down on the bed again. That's up to you. There was a pause, and she began to cry. Are you okay? I don't know. I thought I did, but now I'm not sure. I started drinking after the last time I saw you. I wanted to drown myself in alcohol because I thought it would make the memories go away, but it only made them stronger. It brought back every detail. She fell silent. Do you remember what you wrote in your letter when you sent back the divorce papers? Most. I remember every word. I still have it, and I've read it at least 1,000 times. You wrote that if divorce would make me happy, you're happy to sign the papers. That's all you wanted to do in this life. And the thought about being single, hurting you, and if divorce will make me happy again, then you sign the papers with joy. I loved you from the day I met you, you said. Signing these papers was one of the easiest things I've ever done because it will make you happy, and you signed it. I cried when I first read it, and I cry every time I read it now. She turned away and started crying. There was silence in the room for a long time. I sat on the windowsill and looked at her. I felt powerless to help her. I wanted to cry a little myself. I stayed with her until it was time to go to dinner. She didn't want to go, but she had to. She acted like she wanted to hug me, but just like before, she was afraid to touch me. When I left, I drove straight to her parents' house. "Why is she there?" I asked. "We don't know for sure. It was her idea. She said she had to stop drinking, and they would help her." "Has she ever had a problem with alcohol?" "Never." "What caused the beginning?" "We thought you could answer that question because we don't know." "I'm no expert, but I think her problem is that she's hiding from something. I think she should go home. I don't think they can help her there." I expressed my opinion. "I agree," said her father. "I'm not sure," her mother said. "With your permission, I would like to visit her again tomorrow." "Of course," they said unanimously. I was there the next morning bright and early. She was in the dining room, having breakfast. Her eyes lit up when she saw me. "You're back," she said with a huge smile. "Yes." "Would you like some coffee?" "I want to, but not here." "Where?" "At your parents' house. Why don't we have lunch with them?" "Are you serious?" "Yes." "What do I need to do to get out of here?" "Don't know." "Do you want to stay here?" "Not if you want me to leave." "Then let's leave." We went to her room, collected her things, and went to the register. "I'm going home," Lisa announced, and we left. As soon as she got into my car, she called her parents. "Hey, Mom, I'm on my way home." Pause. "Michael will bring me." Pause. "We'll be there soon. Love you. Bye." The rest of the trip passed in silence. Neither of us said anything, but I felt her gaze on me every minute of the journey. It was as if she was trying to remember me in case I suddenly disappeared. It was similar to the day before when she kept me in her sight the entire time I was with her. Her parents were standing at the front door when we arrived. Lisa jumped out and hugged them, as if she had left for a long time. "Why? How?" Her parents could barely pronounce it. "Michael wanted to have lunch with you, so we came home." "When will you be back?" asked her mother. Lisa looked at me. I shrugged. She looked at her mother. "Never. I don't need them." We had lunch. Then we had dinner. It was almost midnight when I went home. She walked me to the car. "Thank you, Michael." "Please." "Will we see each other again?" "Don't know." Now I can come to terms with it, I think, because for many years I thought you hated me. You said you didn't, but I didn't believe it. But after the last 2 days, I feel in my heart that you don't. Now all I need is to stop hating myself. She returned to the house. What should I do now? I thought to myself as I returned home. I have to admit that spending the day with her brought back some good memories. But every time I looked at her, I saw her pregnant with another man's child. I stayed home and worked in the garden and around the house for the next couple of days. It was like catharsis for me. On the third day, I called Lisa's parents. "How is she?" I asked. "Wonderful. She looks like her old self again. She was asking if we've heard anything from you." "Maybe I'll call her. I had her number when she called me." "She's back at work today and will finish at 3. "Does she still live with you?" "No. She came home yesterday." "Good for her." At 4 o'clock, I called her. "Hello." "Hi, this is Michael." I could almost hear her sigh. "Hello." I wanted to know how you were doing. Okay, Michael. Thank you. Listen, if you haven't eaten yet, would you like to grab something to eat at Enrique's? There was silence. Hello? Oh, sorry, Michael. You caught me off guard. I understand. Another time then. No, no, I'd love to go. I couldn't figure out why or when I decided to invite her to dinner, but I never found an answer. That evening we had a good time, reminiscing about old friends and good times. When I took her home, I walked her to the door. Would you like a cup of coffee? I almost agreed, but was able to refuse, saying that I had a long day and needed to sleep. We hugged goodbye. My children have been away long enough. I wanted them to come home. I spoke with them and their grandfather several times and realized that they were not ready to come home, and he was not ready to let them go. I chuckled. I talked to Ruth and said I wanted them to come back. Dad, we can't go back yet, she said. Big Jake is taking us on a Disney cruise. We can't miss it. What? Let me talk to him. He picked up the phone. Yes, Michael. What's the deal with the Disney cruise? This is the one that goes out every week. The kids will love it. Shouldn't we have discussed this? No, I'm their grandfather. I can do whatever I want with them. It's in the grandparents' manual, but they'll need passports. Could you send them by express mail, please? Shouldn't a parent have a say? No. When it comes to relationships between grandparents and grandchildren, parents become nothing. I laughed. Okay, Jake, but if something happens to them. Now he laughed. Everything is under control, Michael. Enjoy another week on your own. Maybe I'd rather see my kids. It's a shame. You lost this time. We both laughed. I sent their passports by express mail. Maybe if they were at home, I would have less reason to call Lisa. But as it was, I was able to wait 2 more days. Hi, Michael. Hi. I was wondering if you would like to go to Oklahoma City on Friday. There's a symphony orchestra. It was Lisa who first introduced me to classical music. However, the program they were going to perform consisted entirely of Beatles, but I didn't tell her that. I should have known better, because she knew. You know they're going to do a Beatles tribute, right? She laughed as she said this. It's okay. We don't have to go. No, I'd really like to go. We often went to Oklahoma City to see the symphony and spent the night there each time. This time, I didn't plan to stay with her overnight. Friday morning arrived and Lisa called me. I won't be able to go with you tonight, she said. I was tempted to ask her why, but I didn't. I thought she might offer a reason herself. She didn't do this. But thanks for inviting me. It means a lot to me. Maybe another time, I said. Hope. So perhaps she was getting used to my presence and forgiving me. She could finally begin to forgive herself and go back to the life she led before I came back. Lisa and I didn't communicate at all for the next 2 weeks. Finally, my children were returning home. I went to Oklahoma City and met them. Big Jake came with them. I tried to persuade him to stay with us for a few days, but he wanted to go home. There were many tearful goodbyes. Well, he and the girls cried. Little Jake stood nearby, embarrassed by his sisters' and grandfather's public display of affection. They didn't stop talking the whole way home, and I learned more about Disney World and Disney cruises than I ever wanted to know. 2 days later, 4 of us were in the supermarket. Food doesn't last long with 3 hungry kids. I sent Ruth and Carrie for bananas. They returned a couple of minutes later without bananas, but with Lisa. Dad, Ruth said, look who I found. She took bananas too. Ruth remembered Lisa from her short stay in the hospital. Hi, I said. Hello. Are you okay? Yes, everything is fine. Fine. Long, awkward pause. Well, I guess it's time for us to go. Let's go, kids. Of course, she said. Maybe we'll see each other again. I watched her leave and part of me wanted to follow her and ask her what happened between us. Then I thought we never existed. It was just me trying to help an old friend who turned out to be my ex-wife. But, in fact, I missed the little time we spent together, and I didn't know whether I missed Lisa, the children, or the adult female company and all the good things that came with it. My brother Matt has a wife. Her name is Rose. Rose has a cousin. Her name is Francesca. Francesca and I apparently dated many years ago, but I didn't remember it. Matt and Rose invited me to dinner one night. Francesca was there. It was a pleasant evening. Francesca was attractive and charming, but there was nothing about her that made me want more. I made it clear to Matt and Rose that their matchmaking was over for me. It's not that I don't want to date someone. I want to. One Saturday afternoon, my kids were with their cousins at the pool. I went to the park and sat by the lake. I always did this when I was younger. This was my fortress of self-isolation. Even when the park was full of people, I felt alone. I remembered my life, my marriage to Lisa, our meeting and courtship of Connie, marriage, her death, my army career, and my 3 wonderful children. I was a happy man. I fell deeply and passionately in love with 2 women and realized that this is the only way to love. I reached a point where it didn't matter that Lisa cheated on me. If we had not divorced, I would never have met Connie and I would not have had my children. The reason for the divorce no longer mattered. I woke up. I wanted to return to my children. I turned around and almost crashed into Lisa. I watched you for over an hour. You didn't move, she said. I thought. That's what I thought. You always spent a lot of time here when you were trying to figure something out. Yes, it is. You and I used to come here and park right there. She pointed to a place that I remembered well. I remember. This is where we kissed for the first time. I smiled. She hit me on the shoulder. This is where you seduced me for the first time, and I was still very young. Seduced you? Yeah, you almost attacked me. We walked to the picnic table and sat down. It's been a long 2 weeks, she said. I missed you. And I want you too. Do you know why I couldn't go to the symphony with you? I decided it was none of my business. That's your business. She fell silent. When we went, we always stayed overnight. We took a hotel room and took wine and cheese with us. When the weather was good and depending on the floor we were staying on, we turned off all the lights in the room, sat on the balcony naked, drank wine and ate cheese. Then we went back inside and made love. We never had sex. Michael, we always made love. I remember. That's why I couldn't go. I couldn't bear the thought of sitting next to you, listening to the music, and knowing that we'd come back here when the concert was over instead of going to the hotel. We sat there for a long time before I spoke. I can understand that, but what happened in the last 2 weeks? Honestly? Yes. I don't trust myself around you. You just said I almost attacked you there the first time we had sex. The truth is, I have a hard time keeping my hands off you every time I see you. Right now, I could easily have sex with you and not care who sees it. We looked at each other for a second before looking away. Then she spoke again. I came to the conclusion that you would never love me again, or want to make love to me, or even just have sex, so I stayed away. I believe we are friends, I said. And me too. There was a long, empty pause. Well, I have to go. I came here to think, but if I stay, I'll only think about you. She started walking towards her car. I approached her and walked next to her. Somewhere along our walk, we held hands. At her car, I opened the door for her, and she started to get in. Lisa. She stopped and looked at me. How many men have you dated since your last divorce? She looked at me. 3. Did you sleep with them? With one of them. Twice. She got into the car and drove away. I watched her drive away. I don't know why I asked her about this. It was none of my business and had nothing to do with anything. I went home. It was the following Saturday. My children, as always, were swimming with their cousins. I was at the intersection of 14th and Grand when someone ran a red light and hit my car. I woke up in the hospital. My left arm was in a sling. I looked and my mother, brother, and sister were looking at me. Mom leaned over to kiss me on the cheek. She took my hand. "How are you feeling?" "It's like I've been hit by a truck." My brother laughed. In fact, that's what happened. The driver was under the influence of illegal substances. We put him in jail. Mom said, "The doctor says you'll be fine. You're pretty banged up and bruised. And sure, you have a sprained shoulder, but overall it could have been worse." My children came to visit me later. The girls were crying, and Jake was fascinated by all the tubes and wires. It was late in the evening, and I convinced everyone to leave because I wanted to be alone. I'm tired of the company. Dinner that night was a hamburger and fries. Both were cold when they were brought into my room. I was hungry, so I ate everything, even though it was cold. I was given enough painkillers that I really didn't feel any pain. I was watching TV when I saw my door slowly start to open. I watched as she walked in and stood by my bed. "How do you feel?" "Could be worse." "Can you get out of bed?" "I haven't tried it. I guess they don't want me to." "Okay," she said, then leaned over and kissed me. A long, slow kiss that went to the depths of my soul and told me that she really meant it. "I've wanted to do this ever since I saw you here with Ruth. Now you can call management and complain if you want. But I did it, and I'm not sorry. After I saw you at the lake, I decided that I still love you, and if I have to break my heart, then so be it." Then she left. I stayed up until 2 in the morning trying to figure out what I thought about that kiss and her statement. I pressed a button on my TV, nurse call, and bed controls, and the top of my bed lowered to a horizontal position. I knew I liked her kiss, but I couldn't decide if it was because it was her or because I was so desperate that kissing any woman would have the same effect. Eventually, I fell asleep. When I woke up at 7 in the morning, my mother was here. We did the usual "how are you" ritual before she sat on the edge of my bed and took my right hand, holding it and stroking it. Then she asked, "What's going on between you and Lisa?" "What are you talking about?" I asked as I released her hand and reached for the button to raise the top of the bed so I could sit down. When I arrived, she was sitting in that chair, sleeping under the covers. Was she here all night? I don't know. It was after 2 when I fell asleep. She wasn't here then. Well, she woke up a minute or 2 later, greeted me, and said she'd go check if your breakfast was ready. Then she left. That was 15 minutes ago. Then the door opened and Lisa came in with my breakfast tray. She placed it on the table and positioned it so that the tray was directly in front of me. There were scrambled eggs, but I told them you preferred your eggs soft-boiled, so they changed the order. "So, are you still eating them like that?" She took the lid off the plate and 2 perfect eggs stared back at me. "I also told them that you prefer ham to Turkish sausage or bacon." She looked at me and smiled. She then placed a napkin on my chest and began cutting up my ham and eggs. Then she took my fork to bring the piece to both of them and brought the fork to me. "What are you doing?" "I'm not helpless." That's basically what you are. Your left arm is in a sling and you're left-handed. You can't feed yourself because you've never been able to use your right arm for anything useful, so just open your mouth like a good boy. I opened my mouth while my mother laughed. I remembered the cold hamburger and fries the night before and didn't remember having any problems with the food, but I decided not to say anything. "Oh, sorry, Mrs. Carter. Would you like to do that?" Still laughing, Mom said, "No, honey, you're doing it well. I already worked my share when he was a baby." "He's still a baby," Lisa said, wiping my mouth with a napkin. I ate everything on the tray and couldn't take my eyes off her. She let me drink the coffee myself. When I finished, she wiped my mouth with the napkin again and then kissed me again. After she left, Mom said, "Michael, you have a woman in love on your hands. What are you going to do about it? I have no idea, I said, looking at the closed door. I stayed in the hospital for 2 more days, and it turned out that she never left the hospital for a minute. She spent her nights sleeping in the chair next to my bed. If something was bothering me, she wouldn't let anyone else deal with it. The only person besides her who could feed me was Ruth, who thought it was funny. Carrie liked it too. Jake thought it was funny. On the morning of my discharge, she was there to escort me to the exit, where my brother was already waiting for me. "Call me if you need anything," she said, leaning over and kissing me again. I thought this was becoming a habit when Matt took me away. I looked at him, and there was a grin on his face. "Not a word," I said. "Not a word." He didn't say anything, but the grin never went away. The first night home, I called her. "I was hoping you would call," she said. "Thanks for all the help at the hospital. Could you come and help Ruth and Carrie prepare dinner? They want to do it, but they need a little help." She arrived 20 minutes later, and I could hear her and the girls laughing as they prepared dinner. Jake doesn't usually come into the kitchen unless it's to grab something from the refrigerator, but soon I heard him laughing along with the others. She stayed and ate with us at the insistence of my children. After dinner, the girls volunteered to clean up for the first time in my memory. Lisa came into the living room to chat while the girls were cleaning up. Jake had no intention of helping his sisters. The girls finished, and all 3 children went to their rooms, saying goodnight and hugging us. Even little Jake hugged Lisa. Lisa and I talked. The children took a shower and went to bed. Lisa and I were still talking. It was nearly midnight, and I was showing signs of fatigue. "Sleepy?" she asked. "A little. If you need help showering, I'm available." She smiled. Not in my heart. Stupid. I can wrap your bandage around it so it doesn't get wet." "I don't need a bandage. I'm not helpless," I said. "Okay," she said. "I'll go home." She stood up, grabbed her purse, came over and kissed me goodnight. Constant thinking became a habit of mine, and that night was no exception. One of the things that nagged at the edge of my brain was that there was something different about Lisa. 2 days passed when I realized what was happening. She didn't smell like I remembered. In fact, she only smelled of soap. A very nice soap, but a soap nonetheless. Never any perfume. That's all. No taboo. Over the next few weeks, Lisa visited my home at least 4 times a week. The children are used to her preparing dinner and eating with us. I liked it too. I was notified that I had a permanent teaching position and that school would begin soon. I completely forgot about clothes and baby supplies. We took good care of their supplies, but when it came to clothes, even Jake didn't want me to go shopping with him. One morning, we were discussing this at home, and Ruth said, "Lisa knows more than you, Dad. She can help us. She might not be available. Call her." I put the phone on speakerphone. Her phone rang. "Hi, Michael." "Hello? I have a rebellion on my hands." "Mutiny?" "Yes. It's time to buy school clothes, and my 3 ragamuffins aren't sure about my choice." There was a chorus of agreement. Lisa laughed. "That's because you shouldn't choose girls' clothes." Ruth and Carrie applauded. "Me too," Jake squeaked. "So they want you to come with us." Silence. Then I heard a sob. "Really?" she asked. "Is it true? If you don't have time, they'll have to deal with me." "No, I'll find time." "When?" "Now." Their unanimous answer came. "Did you hear that?" I asked. "Yes. Yes, I will do it." I could almost feel her smile. We picked her up and went shopping. This went on until late in the evening, and I have never seen my kids have more fun. We returned home and ordered pizza for dinner. They started trying on the things they bought, and we had a big party. It was getting late, and I asked Lisa if she was ready to go. She looked around. The kids were still messing around and eating the leftover pizza. "Not really, but I think I should." "Okay, kids, I'll take Lisa home. Take a shower and go to bed. When I return, you should all be asleep." We drove to her house in silence. I walked her to the door. For the first time in years, I initiated a kiss. "Thank you for today," I said. "Any time," she said, touching my hand and smiling. Then she went inside. I waited just a few seconds before ringing her doorbell. She immediately opened the door. It was as if she had been waiting for this. "Can I ask you a question?" I asked. "Certainly. Why don't you wear taboo anymore?" She looked at me and tears came to her eyes. She took my hand. "Come with me." She took me to her bedroom and released my hand. She walked over to the dresser, opened the bottom drawer, and took out a box. She placed it on the bed and opened it. It contained our wedding album, her rings, our marriage certificate, and a stack of letters. The last thing in the box was a half-full bottle of taboo. "I sealed this bottle the day I asked you for a divorce. It was your perfume, and you bought the bottle for me. I haven't worn it or any other perfume since then." She put it back in the box and put the box back in the drawer. "I'll put it on again when you ask me." I took her hand and walked to the front door. When we arrived, I opened the door and turned to face her. I took both her hands in mine. "There's a concert in Oklahoma City on Friday night. I'd like you to come with me and wear this." She looked at me, her eyes widened, and she began to cry. I don't remember her ever crying so much. I didn't know anyone had so many tears. She couldn't stop, so I went back into the house, closed the door, and hugged her. It took her a long time to stop. As she did so, she reached into my right back pants pocket and pulled out a handkerchief that she must have remembered me always carrying there. She stood and wiped her eyes. "Seriously?" she asked. "Seriously." "Are you kidding?" "I am not kidding." "Should I take a bag?" She asked the question in a way that almost begged me to say yes. I smiled. "Just your toothbrush. You won't need any clothes." I picked her up on Friday afternoon. She was beautiful and wore taboo. The trip was quiet. The symphony was, well, I don't know how it was, because I didn't pay any attention to it. I just kept looking at Lisa, who was looking at me. About 20 minutes into the program, she leaned over and whispered, "You know, we don't have to listen to all of this." "I know, but the anticipation makes it even more exciting," I whispered back. "I'm tired of waiting. I want to make love with you." SHHH came from the row behind us. "Rent the room." He stepped out of the line in front of us. "Good idea," I said, standing up and grabbed her hand, and we walked outside. 30 minutes later, we were in our room. I was shaking. She was shaking. The whole room seemed to shake. I walked up to her and hugged her. "Would you like some champagne?" I asked quietly in her ear. "No, all I need is you." To hell with what came before. It was here and now, and I wanted it. We lived on the 10th floor of the hotel. Our room faced a busy street, but we didn't care. After our first lovemaking, we went out onto the balcony with glasses of champagne and sat naked watching the traffic below. Then we went back inside and made love again. The drive home was like old times. We were young lovers again. I drove her home, but before I left, we had sex. A couple of days later, Lisa came to our house for dinner. I grilled steaks and shrimp. As soon as Lisa entered the house, the children rushed to hug her. When Ruth approached her, she stopped and looked at her. "You smell like my mother," Ruth told her. "What?" asked Lisa. "You smell like my mother. She wore the same perfume." Lisa looked at me with narrowed eyes. The rest of the meal, instead of being entertaining, was tense. The children didn't notice this, but I, of course, did. Every time I looked at Lisa, she shot arrows at me. Finally, dinner was over. "I have to go," Lisa said. "I'll walk you to your car," I said. I tried to hold her hand as we walked to her car, but she pushed me away. I opened the door for her, and she turned to face me. I thought it was me, but it wasn't me. It was her. "You didn't want me. You wanted her back." That's why you asked me about perfume. You just wanted a part of her back. It is not true. Of course I like. No, I like this perfume, but you got it first. If anything, maybe I was attracted to her because of you. She got into her car and drove away. A whole month passed, and she did not allow me to talk to her. She blocked my number, and a couple of times when I went to her house to try to talk to her, she wouldn't answer the door. One day when I saw her at the mall, she walked the other way. The children couldn't understand it, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't explain it. One Saturday evening, the children and I went to the cinema. It was some kind of girly movie that Ruth and Carrie wanted to see, but Jake and I were afraid. The movie had not yet started, and the lights in the house were still on. "Isn't this Lisa?" Carrie asked. I looked, and she was walking down the aisle to her seat. She was followed by the man sitting next to her. "Yes, that's true," I said. "Can we go say hello?" she asked. "I don't think so." The lights went down, and the movie started. Whenever the lights in the movie got bright enough, I would look where she was sitting. One day, I saw them take turns sucking water from the same straw in a drinking cup. When the film ended, we left. Lisa and her companion saw us in the lobby. She came up and greeted the children. She never introduced her life partner and never spoke to me. When they left, I heard him ask who we were. "This is my ex and his family," she told him. Life went on. The Christmas holidays had just started, and I was trying to finish my Christmas shopping. My mother, my brother and his family, and my sister and her family were taken care of. I still wanted to do more for my kids, so I walked around the mall. I found myself in the only men's store in the shopping center. There were several shops for women, but only one for men. I was looking at suits because mine were getting old and a little worn. The salesman walked with me. I didn't need anyone to do it, but I didn't stop her. After I had seen everything I wanted to see, I thanked her and went to leave. When I left, Lisa was standing at the large open door. I started just walking around her, but she started talking. "Find something you like." "Why do you care?" I kept walking. She was close enough to me that I knew she wasn't wearing taboo. "Do you want to talk?" she asked. "I don't think we have anything to discuss." I said, "Keep going. You said enough when you accused me of not wanting you, but wanting Connie back. If you want to talk, you can talk to your boyfriend. He's just a friend. Apparently, a good friend. Good enough to share a straw with." She was still a step or two behind me, but she caught up with me and grabbed my arm. "What are you talking about?" I freed myself and continued walking. "I saw you drinking from the same straw." He dropped his drink, and we shared mine. "What's bad about it?" "Casual friends don't do things like that. This is what close friends or lovers do." She stopped. I didn't do it. "What are you saying?" "You heard my every word. You are clever. You understand English." I kept walking. She hurried to catch me. "You accuse me of." I stopped and turned to look at her. "Are you sleeping with him?" "What?" "Are you hard of hearing?" "What right do you have to ask me about this?" When I asked her at the lake how many men she had dated since her divorce and whether she had slept with them, she answered without hesitation, but now she became defensive. "I have no right to do this, but I thought we were getting to a place where, oh, damn, I have to go," and I turned to leave. She grabbed my hand and stopped me. "I'll sleep with whoever I want. Do you understand this? I don't belong to you and never have." "You're right. I've never done this. You always slept with whoever you wanted. Even marriage didn't stop you." I reached out, took her hand off mine, and went home. The children and I had a wonderful Christmas. Matt and Rose were invited to a New Year's party in the neighborhood. They asked me to come with them, and I took a step that was completely unlike me. We hadn't been there long when Lisa and a man I recognized from the film appeared. I told Matt I was leaving and explained why. "Oh my God, Michael, are you going to run away every time you see her with someone? Dude, Get back in the game. This was the best advice I ever received, and I followed it. I grabbed the beer and started swirling it. Eventually, I found myself in a small group, and we were joined by Lisa, who seemed to know most of them. They had no idea that Lisa and I had any history, and we gave no indication that we knew each other. "How's Timmy?" someone asked. "He's fine," Lisa replied. "He's there. He wants a drink." "Is he a keeper?" asked one of the ladies. I didn't look directly at her, but I felt that she was looking at me, so I looked back. Our eyes were locked on each other when she answered. "Maybe, for someone." She apologized and left. They seemed like a good couple. Someone from the group said, "Yes, but something is wrong. Timmy is a little upset. He likes her, but apparently she has some problems, and he doesn't know whether to wait. He says she treats him like her brother." Oh shit. Unrequited love. The worst possible. I feel sorry for him. Someone else said. "That doesn't mean he didn't get her." Added one more person. "She doesn't have fun with anyone. She has been my friend for a long time, and we work together at the hospital. Every now and then she starts crying, and none of us knows why. Personally, I think it's because of her ex-husband. She still loves him, and he must not treat her well." "How did you know that?" I intervened. "I do not know exactly, but I know she has a picture of him in her work locker, and oh my God, it's you, you're her ex." There was a general noise. They were talking among themselves and stealing glances at me. I left them and headed to my car. On the way out, I met Matt. "I'm leaving," I told him. Lisa and Timmy were standing at the kitchen counter with another couple. Our eyes met as I walked past them. I was almost in my car when I turned around and walked back. I approached them. She was simply wiping her eyes. "Sorry, but I would like to talk to you," I told Lisa. "Why?" "I just want to ask you a question." Pause. "Please." "Sorry, Timmy. I'll be right back." We went out onto the sidewalk. "It's far enough. Ask your question." Actually, there are several of them. "First, do you have a photo of me in your locker at work?" She looked back at the house. "Yes." She turned away from me. "Why?" There was a long hesitation. "This is important, Lisa. Please respond." She turned to face me. "Because I love you." "Then why didn't you tell me?" "Because you're an asshole." "Okay, I'm an asshole, but I'm an asshole who loves you." Her eyes grew huge for a second and then narrowed. "I don't know if I believe you." "This is true. You accused me of sleeping with Timmy. I do not care anymore. I cheated on you and another man got me pregnant. It was a long time ago and far away. Once you forgive me, you will never be able to bring this up and throw it in my face. I have already forgiven you." There, on the street, she attacked me in the same way as at home. We hugged and kissed. 2 cars drove by and honked. She put her hands on my face. "The last man I slept with besides you was the one I told you about at the lake. One of 3 men I dated after my divorce. Timmy and I are friends. Nothing more. He wants there to be more, but I can't." We're back to the party. Timmy stood in the doorway. We approached him. "I'm so sorry, Timmy," she said. "I understand." He looked at me. "I'm guessing you'll take her home, so there's no reason for me to stay here." He left. The party took an interesting turn when Lisa and I walked hand in hand. There was a lot of whispering and instructions. When Matt saw us, he just started laughing. We stayed for about 30 minutes more. Exactly at midnight, we lay in her bed and stroked her. She became an almost constant companion in our house, but she never spent the night, and I never spent the night at her house. Except, of course, for those weekends when the kids spent the night at one of their cousins' houses. Depending on what shift she worked, Lisa and the girls would often cook dinner, and on those nights Lisa would usually stay until midnight. She worked nights, and one morning after her shift, I picked her up at work and brought her to my house. It was Saturday morning, and the girls prepared breakfast for us. After the five of us ate, Lisa and I washed the dishes. She sat there for a couple more hours. I saw how tired she was, so I took her to my room and told her to sleep for a few hours. I closed the door and turned to go back to the living room. Ruth stood there. "Do you love Lisa?" she asked. "What do you care about this? Curious one. Answer my question, Dad." "Fine. Yes, I love. More than Mom." "Oh my God, no, sweetie. This is a different love." "How else?" "Let's see if I can explain this." I stopped, took a deep breath, took her hand and walked down the hallway into the living room, talking as I walked. "Do you love your brother?" "Certainly." "What about your sister?" "Don't be stupid, Dad. Of course I love." "What about me? What about your grandfather?" "What do you want to say, Dad?" "I want to say that we can love many different people, and that love takes many forms. But that does not mean that we love one person more than another. It just means we love it differently. You understand?" "I think so." I laughed. Lisa slept until noon and then spent the rest of the day with us. Late that evening, I took her to the hospital so she could pick up the car and go home. The next morning, before breakfast, I heard Ruth and Carrie talking, but I couldn't make out the words. As usual, Jake was only interested in breakfast. Ruth and Carrie came to have breakfast. Carrie spoke first. "Are you going to marry Lisa?" "Again?" she asked. "I would like to, but a lot depends on you three." "Why us?" asked Ruth. "Well, if I ask her to marry me and she says yes, that means she'll move here and live with us." "Would you sleep in the same bed?" Carrie asked. "Certainly. Married people always sleep together unless they are mad at each other," Ruth said. "How did you know that?" I asked. "Dad," she said, as if I was the biggest dumbass in the world. "How many kids at my school do you think live with both biological parents?" I shrugged. "Less than half. Don't they teach you this kind of stuff in college?" I must have missed this lesson. Little Jake spoke. "If you marry her and she lives here, does that mean she will cook for us all the time?" "At least part of the time," I told him. "But we will have to do our part. She will be a wife and stepmother, not a housewife or a slave." "I'm fine with that," he said. Ruth and Carrie shared his opinion. The children and I spent a week choosing a ring. I thought about getting her old rings out of the box in her room, but decided it should be a fresh start with a new ring. The day we bought them, Ruth called her and asked her to come. When she got there, 3 children ran into the driveway and nearly dragged her out of the car and into the house. They took her to the middle of the living room and told her to stay here and don't move. Then they just stood there and waited for me. "What's happening?" asked Lisa. "Daddy wants to ask you something," little Jake said, almost choking with laughter, while his sisters tried to shush him. I was in my room trying to calm down. I had no doubts about wanting to marry her, but one of her comments made me think. "Once you forgive me, you will never be able to bring this up and throw it in my face." It was true. My parents taught me that if you give someone a gift, you can't take it back, and it's none of your business what they do with it. If they want to give it to someone else, they can do so. They also taught me what Lisa told me. Once you forgive someone, no matter what they did, you can't take it back, and you can never bring it up, so you better be sure you really want to forgive them. As little Jake once said, "It suits me." I walked into the living room, and she stood there, looking at my 3 troublemakers and wondering what was going on. Or maybe she knew, or at least suspected. It only took a few seconds for me to realize that she had no idea, because the second I fell to one knee, she passed out. I never asked her because as soon as she came to her senses, she started saying yes, yes, yes. The wedding took place 5 months later. Her father gave her away for the 3rd time. This was the 2nd time he gave it to me. "I don't want to do this again," he said at the altar. "You will not have to," I told him. "It's forever." I smiled looking at her and inhaled the almost 20-year-old taboo. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.